This happened to me in the fall of 2017 when I was camping in the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky. I had been camping in this area a couple of times before, but this trip was meant to be a solo getaway. I wanted to disconnect from the world for a few days, and this dense, beautiful forest seemed perfect for that. I arrived at the trailhead late in the afternoon, and after about a 4-mile hike, I found a clearing to set up camp. It was tucked between a cluster of trees, far enough off the trail to feel private, but close enough for me to find my way back easily. The weather was crisp, the air smelled like fallen leaves, and the woods were quiet except for the rustling of squirrels and the occasional bird call. I spent most of the evening by the fire, eating a simple meal and enjoying the peace. As the sun set, the forest transformed into an entirely different place. The darkness out here was thick, like a wall pressing in on you, and the only light came from my small fire. The sounds changed too. Branches creaked in the wind, and the occasional rustle in the underbrush would snap me to attention. Still, I told myself it was just animals. It always is, right? It was around 10 p.m. when I first saw the glow. At first, I thought it might be a reflection from my own campfire, but it wasn't. About 50 yards away, deeper into the woods, there was another light, a small flame, like a candle or a lantern. My heart jumped. I wasn't expecting anyone else to be out here, especially not this far off the trail. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The light flickered like a fire, but it was stationary, as if someone had set it down. I called out, "Hello? Is someone out there?" My voice echoed through the trees, but I got no reply. I stood up, unsure of what to do. It didn't make sense for someone to camp that close to me without introducing themselves. And the light, it felt deliberate, like it was placed there to draw my attention. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and walked a few steps closer. The second my flashlight beam hit the spot where the light had been, it vanished. 1 second it was there, flickering softly, and the next, it was gone, leaving nothing but empty woods. I stood there, frozen, my flashlight scanning the area. I didn't see any tents, people, or even a trail leading away. It was as if whoever or whatever was there had simply disappeared. I backed up slowly toward my own campsite, every instinct in my body screaming at me to leave. But it was late, and the idea of hiking back to the trailhead in total darkness seemed even more dangerous than staying put. So I stoked my fire to make it bigger and sat with my back to a tree, my knife within reach. Around midnight I heard it, the sound of footsteps crunching through the leaves, slow and deliberate, circling just beyond the light of my fire. I held my breath, trying to pinpoint the direction, but they seemed to come from everywhere at once. I called out again, "Who's there?" But there was no response, just the sound of those steady, shuffling steps, moving closer, then farther away. And then, as suddenly as they started, they stopped. The silence was deafening, and I sat there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. When the sun finally rose, I packed up my gear in record time and practically ran back to my car. When I got to the ranger station at the park entrance, I mentioned the strange light and the footsteps to the ranger. He gave me a knowing look and said, "You're not the first camper to report something like that. People have been seeing lights in those woods for years, but no one's ever figured out where they come from." I've since read that this area of the Daniel Boone National Forest has a lot of unexplained phenomena. Phantom lights, strange sounds, and even missing person cases. I don't know what I encountered that night, but I've never camped there again. On a serene evening by Lake Superior, I settled into my tent, lulled by the gentle sounds of the wilderness. In the dead of night, I was jolted awake by a cacophony of hissing and growling. Heart pounding, I unzipped my tent to a scene of chaos. Dozens of raccoons had descended upon the campsite, drawn by the scent of food left out by a fellow camper. They fought viciously over scraps, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. Some ventured into tents, emerging with stolen items. I remained inside, paralyzed by the sheer number of them. The night was filled with their unsettling noises, a stark reminder of how a simple oversight can lead to a night of terror in the wild. These stories serve as a testament to the unpredictable and often perilous nature of the wilderness. They remind us to remain vigilant, respect the environment, and understand that when we venture into the wild, we are merely visitors in another's domain.
A secluded campsite in northeastern Ohio, surrounded by dense woods. I decided to spend a few nights alone in the woods to clear my mind. On the third night, I woke up needing to relieve myself. Stepping out of my hammock, I noticed a faint headlamp flickering about 80 feet away. I watched silently as the figure stood up, then sat back down. Unease settled in, but I tried to dismiss it. As I moved to investigate, I spotted another headlamp, this one much closer, only about 40 feet away. Panic surged through me. I dropped to the ground, covering myself with leaves, hoping to remain unseen. The second figure approached, stopping just 10 feet from where I lay. He lit a cigarette, the glow illuminating his face, and discarded his beer can carelessly before moving away. Summoning courage, I crept closer to the first figure. I could hear the faint buzz of his phone receiving messages. My heart pounded as I realized they were communicating, possibly about me. Suddenly, the first figure stood and began walking toward my hammock. I remained motionless, paralyzed by fear. From my concealed position, I heard them rummaging through my campsite. The sound of my tarp being slashed, metal clanging as they trashed my mess kit, and their voices filled the air. "He was just here," one of them muttered. I stayed hidden, praying they'd leave. When dawn broke, I cautiously returned to my campsite. The sight was devastating. My hammock and tarp were shredded, my mess kit crushed, and several items, including my backpack and flashlight, were gone. Evidence of their presence was everywhere. Discarded beer cans, chew pouches, and even a bag that once contained meth. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't alone in those woods, and whoever was out there had malicious intentions. The serenity I once sought in solitude was shattered forever. I cherish solo camping trips, finding solace in the embrace of nature. One morning, as the sun's first rays pierced through the canopy, I unzipped my tent to start the day. To my astonishment, there was a cup of tea placed on the ground, steam still rising from it. I hadn't made it. I scanned the area, calling out to see if anyone was nearby. Silence. The realization that someone had been mere feet from me while I slept sent chills down my spine. I searched for footprints or any signs of intrusion, but found nothing. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig had me on edge. That night, sleep eluded me as I lay awake, clutching a flashlight, dreading the return of the phantom visitor. Morning came, and with it, a profound sense of vulnerability. I packed up and left, the mystery of the midnight tea drinker haunting me to this day. Camping alone in the Swedish wilderness, I was accustomed to the sounds of nature. One night, a peculiar noise roused me from sleep, a heavy, deliberate sniffing right outside my tent. My mind raced, conjuring images of predators. The sniffing grew louder, accompanied by the sound of something large moving around. I remained still, barely breathing, as the intruder circled my tent. The fabric quivered as it brushed against it. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds faded into the distance. At dawn, I cautiously emerged to find large hoof prints surrounding my tent. An elk had paid me a visit. While not inherently dangerous, their sheer size and power can be lethal if provoked. The encounter left me with a deep respect for the creatures that roam the wild, and a reminder of how vulnerable we are in their domain.